There comes a silent moment in every human life, a nearly invisible turning point, when something begins to shift in our relationships. You can't quite say when it started, but you feel the atmosphere around you changing. People who once smiled at you now avoid your eyes. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly start to feel heavy, awkward, and tense. Old friendships fade without explanation, and those who once praised you now seem to search for reasons to criticize. And then, in the middle of all this noise, in the emptiness left by fading connections, a quiet question rises inside you. What did I do wrong? But the truth is, the answer rarely lies in what you did. In fact, it almost never lies outside of you. What awakens the hostility of others is not always your actions, but your presence. It's not what you do, but what you represent. Your authenticity disrupts the illusions people build around themselves. Human beings are walking paradoxes, divided between light and shadow. The light holds everything we're willing to see in ourselves: love, wisdom, courage, compassion. But the shadow hides everything we've buried: our fears, our envy, our guilt, our repressed desires. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the total of all that the ego refuses to acknowledge. Most people live trapped in the illusion that they can silence their shadow with good intentions, moral speeches, and carefully polished masks. They create what Jung named the persona, a facade built for the world's gaze. And that mask isn't evil by itself. It's necessary to survive among others. But when you start believing that your mask is who you are, you forget the deeper self silently watching from behind your eyes. And what's repressed never truly disappears. It waits. The shadow is patient. It observes quietly until someone, often without meaning to, touches it. That's when discomfort arises. You might simply have been kind, calm, or genuine, and still you triggered someone's anger. Why? Because your authenticity acts like a mirror. Your confidence reflects their insecurity. Your peace confronts their inner chaos. Your light exposes the corner of their mind they've kept hidden. And when the unconscious is revealed, it doesn't respond with understanding. It responds with defense. That's how hatred is born. Not as a rational feeling, but as a cry from a wounded soul. The other person doesn't truly hate you. They hate the part of themselves that they see reflected in you. They can't face their own reflection, so they try to destroy the mirror. This is the silent war few ever notice. Not a war between people, but between consciousness and shadow. And the weapons aren't physical, they're emotional: rejection, indifference, subtle criticism disguised as concern. Humans project onto others everything they cannot accept in themselves, and so, unknowingly, they turn their own pain into judgment. But once you awaken to this truth, something profound changes within you. The guilt dissolves. The need to explain or justify yourself fades away. You realize that other people's hatred is often nothing more than the echo of their inner conflict. Being rejected is sometimes the price of being authentic. Being disliked can be a sign that your presence awakens sleeping truths. And that realization is liberating, because you finally understand you were never meant to fit into someone else's distortion. You were meant to expand, to shine, to illuminate, even if your light blinds those who are not yet ready to see. Hatred, at its core, is unconscious recognition. Deep down, they sense something in you that they have not yet become. So don't defend yourself. Observe. Behind their coldness, there is pain. Behind their criticism, there is envy. Behind their distance, there is fear. Hatred is just a misunderstood emotion, a mirror reflecting the unhealed parts of the human psyche. And when you truly grasp this, you become emotionally sovereign. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You rise. It's in that moment, when your peace no longer depends on anyone's approval, that the unshakable mind is born. A state of being where no external force can disturb your inner center. If this message resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to see beyond the shadow." And if you wish to continue diving deep into self-awareness, subscribe to Unshakable Mind, where every week we explore the depths of the human psyche, not to escape the shadow, but to transform it into strength, clarity, and light. Because there is something profoundly unsettling about how people react to another person's inner strength. Most live with such fragile self-images that when they meet someone who walks with confidence, your very existence becomes a silent provocation. Your freedom becomes a mirror to their chains, and that is where transformation begins. There is a painful kind of silence that lives inside those who have never known true freedom, a silent chain forged by invisible expectations, by the desperate need to be liked, approved, accepted. Look closely at the person who cannot tolerate another's freedom. Inside them lives a long history of obedience, years of emotional conditioning that taught them to please, to conform, to ask for permission just to exist. So when they meet someone who dares to live their truth, what rises inside them isn't admiration. It's irritation, envy, and fear, because your authenticity becomes a mirror that exposes their prison. That's how the shadow works. It doesn't always appear as open hatred. Sometimes it disguises itself as a quiet discomfort, a whisper that says, "He's too arrogant. She thinks she's better than everyone." But what the shadow is really saying is this: "I can't stand seeing in you what I'm too afraid to become." The danger is that the shadow convinces us that what we hate in others is real, when, in truth, it's just a reflection of ourselves. It's easier to attack the external than to confront the internal. Easier to criticize someone else's success than to admit our own stagnation. Easier to condemn another's authenticity than to face the falseness of our own mask. But remember this: the shadow doesn't just live in others, it lives in you too. Just as your presence can awaken discomfort in others, their presence can stir discomfort within you. Pay attention to the people who irritate you for no reason. Notice the traits you despise, mock, or judge. Those reactions are mirrors, fragments of your own shadow asking to be recognized. To deny that is to remain in psychological blindness, always blaming, always projecting, always believing that the darkness is out there, never inside. To see it, however, is the beginning of integration, the courageous act of making peace with the hidden corners of your own soul. As long as a person refuses to face their shadow, it continues to rule them in silence, shaping their judgments, distorting their perceptions, and fueling their most destructive reactions. Those who attack you may never understand that you are not their enemy. You are their mirror. They may never see that what they despise in you is their own unhealed wound, and so they project, they hate, they defend themselves from ghosts within until the pain becomes so unbearable that they can no longer run from themselves. But you, once you see this, you are free from appearances. You stop being fooled by hostility, because behind the mask of hate there is fear. Behind envy there is inferiority. Behind rejection there is a shadow begging to be seen. It's not the conscious self speaking through them, it's their unintegrated pain. Authenticity, then, becomes one of the most disarming forms of power a human being can embody. To be authentic is to live without masks, to speak with a voice that isn't borrowed, to act in alignment with your soul rather than the world's expectations. But it is also one of the most courageous acts because the world fears authenticity. To be authentic is to become, without realizing it, a mirror of truth. And mirrors don't lie. They reveal illusions, they expose falsehoods, they confront the ego's fragile stage play. That's why living authentically provokes such powerful reactions, admiration in some, resistance in many, and hatred in others. Because your truth forces them to question their own fiction. Most people spend their lives constructing identities that are socially acceptable, roles that please others, characters that won't be rejected. These masks become armor. They protect, yes, but they also imprison. And when someone appears without armor, walking in truth, radiating presence, unapologetically themselves, that armor begins to crack. Your authenticity becomes a threat to the entire defense system they've built to survive. So understand this. To be authentic is to be revolutionary. It's to walk through a hall of broken mirrors and remain whole. It's to stand firm in your truth even when the world insists that you're wrong. And by doing so, you become a light tower, not because you seek followers, but because your presence quietly reveals paths that others pretend not to see. Some will love you for that light, others will resent you for it. But one thing is certain, no one will remain untouched. When you truly grasp this, you stop shrinking to fit inside someone else's insecurity. You stop apologizing for existing in truth. Authenticity may disturb others, but it is also the greatest gift you can offer the world and yourself. If this reflection stirred something deep within you, write in the comments, "I choose to live without masks." And remember, this journey of self-awareness and shadow integration doesn't end here. Subscribe to Unshakable Mind and keep diving with me into the depths of the human psyche, where every shadow recognized becomes strength and every truth discovered brings you closer to who you truly are. Because the moment you dare to live as you are, the world as you knew it begins to fall apart. And that's where real freedom begins. There's something profoundly unsettling about witnessing someone who lives in full authenticity. When a human being shows up whole, unmasked, unfiltered, unapologetically real, something begins to tremble inside everyone around them. Suddenly, all those carefully constructed identities, the roles, the masks, the curated appearances, start to look fragile, hollow, temporary. And that's why authenticity is so often perceived as a threat. When you become authentic, you don't even have to say a word. Your very presence reminds others of everything they are not. You awaken the truths they've silenced, the dreams they've abandoned, the compromises they made just to belong. Your presence becomes a living mirror. And that mirror never lies. You don't tell anyone you're not real. But something deep within them, buried in the unconscious, receives that message as a warning, and that warning activates an instinct, defense. That defense rarely comes from awareness. It shows up in subtle ways: rejection, sarcasm, condescension, distance. It's not about you, it's just their shadow trying to protect itself from the light that threatens to expose its falseness. That's why authenticity often feels like a burden. It isolates you. You start to notice people withdrawing, stepping back, minimizing your presence, as if your honesty were a wound that burns through the illusions they're desperate to keep alive. And in a way, it is. It wounds what is false. It cuts through the fragile narratives that sustain the social theater, where everyone plays the role they think the world expects of them. For many, your authenticity is intolerable, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your truth destabilizes the roles they play. You become a living reminder of everything they've repressed in the name of acceptance. Think of the one who refuses to conform. Their freedom is a mirror reflecting everyone else's submission. Think of the one who speaks truth when silence is safer. Their courage awakens the fear sleeping in others. Think of the one who lives without apologizing for existing, who chooses freedom over approval. Their very existence exposes the invisible chains guiding the majority. Authenticity, by its nature, provokes discomfort. It forces people to look inward, and not everyone is ready to see what lies inside. But understand this, authenticity is not arrogance. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's not vanity. It's alignment. It's the pure act of existing in coherence with one's soul. To be authentic is to live without distortion. And paradoxically, that simplicity is what makes it so powerful. A mask demands effort. A lie must be constantly reinforced. An image must be fed every single day. But authenticity flows. It requires no performance because it is born from truth. It doesn't try to appear, it simply is. And that effortless presence, calm, natural, free, exposes the exhausting effort of those still trying to hold up their illusions. That's why people mock the authentic ones. They call them naive, arrogant, eccentric, or dreamers. These reactions are nothing but defense mechanisms, ways to reduce the impact of truth without having to change themselves, because accepting another's authenticity requires the courage to face one's own inauthenticity, and that's a kind of courage many people still lack. It's easier to despise the one who lives in truth than to confront the prison of one's own falseness. It's more comfortable to label the authentic as weird than to whisper deep down, "I wish I had that freedom." But authenticity doesn't just unsettle individuals, it shakes entire structures. Societies, families, religions, corporations, whole communities are built on conformity. They depend on silence, obedience, and the repetition of roles. When someone refuses to play the game, the whole board starts to tremble. Authenticity unmasks the hypocrisy of hierarchies. It reveals the fragility of systems that survive only by pretending to be stable. It shows how much of what we call power is nothing more than fear dressed up as authority. That's why the authentic individual is rarely accepted right away. They're tested, misjudged, discredited. But over time, it is they who transform the atmosphere wherever they go. Because truth carries a silent force, it doesn't need to be imposed, only sustained. To be authentic is to be free, and every true freedom becomes inevitably an invitation for others to awaken. But until they do, they will see you as a threat. So when you notice your authenticity disturbing others, don't retreat. Don't doubt yourself. Don't shrink just to be loved. Keep being the truth the world keeps trying to silence, because the price of authenticity is high, but the cost of falseness will always be your soul, and that power is the soul itself. If this message speaks to you, write in the comments, "I choose to be real, even if it isolates me." Because the path of authenticity is the path of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. Subscribe to Unshakable Mind and keep walking with me. Here, every reflection is a mirror, and every mirror is an invitation to inner liberation. When you refuse to follow the script, when you stop playing the role others expect of you, the entire system begins to shake. Families, corporations, social groups, They all depend on invisible roles, on shared stories that keep the illusion of stability alive. But when one individual chooses to be authentic, the spell breaks. You show that the role was never real, that the script was only a construction, and that everyone, in their own way, was acting. And that's when the reaction begins. He's the problem. She's changed. He's different now. But your authenticity doesn't create the problem. It simply reveals it. It shines a light on what was swept under the rug. It exposes the tensions that were hidden beneath convenience and collective masks. What many call rebellion is, in truth, the pure expression of being, a soul that has grown tired of mutilating itself just to fit into someone else's expectations. Yet authenticity does more than provoke resistance. It awakens something. Silent, a longing. Even those who reject it feel, deep down, a flicker of admiration, because the presence of someone truly genuine reignites a memory of who we were before we lost ourselves. Free, whole, true. They may mock you, criticize you, even attack you, but what they're really feeling is not hatred, it's envy. Not the shallow envy of possessions or status, but a deeper ache, the pain of recognizing what they've abandoned inside themselves. Your courage exposes their cowardice. Your freedom reveals the chains they still obey. Your truth confronts the lies that sustain their lives. That's the paradox of authenticity. It disturbs, but it also inspires. It disrupts the sleep of those still dreaming, yet plants within them the seed of freedom. Even the hardest heart, once touched by an authentic presence, never remains the same. Something begins to move, silently, from within. A call to live more truthfully. But living this way is far from comfortable. To be authentic means to give up approval, to accept being misunderstood, to walk alone at times, because while others are still negotiating their truths, you simply decide to be. You don't bend to shifting opinions. You don't mold yourself to fit the masks of others. You don't betray your soul to win love or belonging. You stand firm, even when your presence shakes those around you. And perhaps that's exactly what makes authenticity so dangerous. It's contagious. Those who live truthfully invite, without words, others to live as well, and that silent invitation is a threat to any system built on conformity, because authenticity is revolutionary. It doesn't need slogans or shouting. Its existence alone is enough. To simply be in truth is to destabilize the illusions that keep the world asleep. But there's an even deeper layer, one that few truly see. Behind every human interaction, there is an invisible dance of power. Every conversation, every silence, every look carries subtle currents of influence. It's not always about domination in the physical sense. It's about control, about who gets to define what is real. It's about validation, recognition, and the unconscious need to mold the other to preserve one's own identity. We like to believe our relationships are built on love, respect, and genuine connection. But look deeper, and you'll see something more complex. There's always someone who needs to be seen, someone who needs to be followed, someone who needs to be right. Some crave admiration, others crave control, and many simply want the other person to confirm their worldview, so they don't have to question their own. These silent forces shape human behavior. They exist in couples, friendships, families. And when one person decides to be authentic, to speak truth even when it hurts, the game changes. Because authenticity removes the power of manipulation. It breaks the spell of emotional dependency, and those who relied on control suddenly find themselves disarmed. Authenticity is disarming because it doesn't play, it doesn't compete, it doesn't pretend, it doesn't try to win. It simply is. And before that kind of presence, the theater of human relationships begins to collapse. When someone's gaze turns cold, when affection fades into indifference, when a friend begins to compete instead of support, it's rarely just mood or misunderstanding. Something invisible has shifted. It's the balance of power, that subtle force flowing through every human bond. Even the most loving ones, even in the most loving relationships, power is rarely balanced. Even in moments of tenderness, there is always a silent current. Someone leads, while another follows. One is heard, while the other adapts. One seeks validation, while the other supplies it. These roles shift over time, and each time they shift, a quiet tension begins to surface. The person who once felt in control begins to feel threatened. The one who used to be the strong one feels the ground slipping away when you begin to rise in strength. The one who depended on your neediness grows uneasy as your independence is born. And suddenly, without knowing exactly why, the bond begins to unravel. But you are not the problem. What they're reacting to is the symbol of who you've become. Your new posture, your confidence, your autonomy, all of it reorganizes the invisible balance of power. And when that happens, the other person's ego feels displaced, exposed, diminished. Think about what happens. When you set a boundary, the moment you say no, something breaks inside them. The one who fed on your compliance feels the control slipping through their fingers. And their reaction isn't really about your no. It's about the loss of power that your boundary represents. The anger, the coldness, the distance, these are unconscious attempts to restore control. The same thing happens when you begin to succeed. Your growth disrupts the unspoken agreement that kept the balance in place. Maybe you were once the student, the one who needed help, the one who didn't know as much. But when you start to flourish, when you display self-trust and confidence, your rise threatens the status of those who were once above you. Your success isn't celebrated, it's felt as betrayal because it changes the silent contract, the one where the other person held emotional advantage. These dynamics reveal themselves in the smallest of things. In conversation, who speaks more and who gets interrupted. In a group, who commands attention and who fades into the background. In families, who gets heard and who gets dismissed. These seemingly trivial details expose the invisible architecture of power that underlies every relationship. And when someone begins to resist the game, when they refuse to play the role expected of them, the entire system trembles. The peace you once knew begins to fracture, and what was hidden suddenly comes to light. The problem is, these forces are so subtle that they almost never get recognized. You might believe someone has simply changed toward you, when in reality they're reacting to the loss of emotional control they once had. You might think you've disappointed someone with your choices, when in truth what disappointed them was that you became uncontrollable. The hostility you face isn't personal, it's symbolic. It's the natural resistance of someone who senses power slipping away. They feel their influence no longer works, and so they fight to preserve the illusion that it still does. Power doesn't always show itself directly. It isn't only authority or open dominance. Sometimes it wears softer masks: guilt, silence, conditional affection. It sounds like, "I'm disappointed in you," or "You've changed." These are refined forms of emotional manipulation, ways to maintain control without raising the voice. Some threaten to withdraw. Others grant affection only when you conform. Some make you feel guilty, simply for being yourself, just to restore the balance they've lost. And the most dangerous part is that all of this happens almost invisibly. Subtle movements, gentle words, carefully timed silences, but the impact runs deep, because at their core, these people aren't trying to destroy you. They're trying to preserve the illusion that they still control what has already slipped away. There are silent pacts that hold many relationships together, invisible agreements, never spoken, but deeply felt. One gives more, the other takes more. One yields, the other dominates. One seeks approval, the other offers validation. And so, the balance remains intact until someone decides to stop playing. When you refuse to feed the role the other expects you to play, something inevitable happens. The structure collapses, and few things provoke as much resentment as the collapse of an unspoken hierarchy, because suddenly the other no longer feels safe. That subtle control, that quiet influence that once felt natural, disappears, and with it, their illusion of superiority begins to crumble. To see this clearly is to understand that most human conflicts do not arise from simple misunderstandings. They are the visible surface of a much deeper struggle. The battle for influence, the fear of losing control, the insecurity of being overshadowed. But no one admits this. No one says, "I'm hurt because you stopped admiring me. I'm angry because I can't manipulate you anymore. I'm resentful because you've grown and it makes me feel small." Instead, they call it betrayal, they call it selfishness, they call it arrogance. But those words are just masks for something far more fragile, the wounded ego trying desperately to survive your evolution. Masks, curtains, disguises used to hide an uncomfortable truth. The power they once had over you is gone. And here lies the essence of it all. The desire for power is not inherently evil. It's woven into the fabric of human nature. People seek control because they fear chaos. They crave influence because it reaffirms their worth. They cling to hierarchies because within them they feel safe. The danger begins when these impulses go unrecognized, when the fear of chaos becomes manipulation, when the hunger for safety hides behind criticism, when the longing for influence mutates into hostility toward anyone who refuses to bow. You can't always dismantle these dynamics. You can't always escape the resentment they provoke. But once you see them clearly, everything changes. You stop internalizing hate as proof of your flaws. You realize that what others project onto you often has nothing to do with you. It's about the invisible chains of power, the fragile sense of control that many protect at all costs. Humans rarely see others as they truly are. We see reflections of ourselves in them. Every relationship is a mirror, revealing secrets, wounds, and truths that the conscious mind prefers to keep hidden. What you admire in someone reveals what you long to awaken within yourself. What you despise in another exposes what you've yet to accept within. This is the mirror effect, one of the deepest laws of human psychology. It's what explains why someone can suddenly turn against you without reason. They aren't reacting to your actions, but to what your presence awakens inside them. When you embody qualities another person has repressed, you become the mirror reflecting what they fear to see. Your courage exposes their buried cowardice. Your clarity highlights their inner confusion. Your freedom unmasks the invisible chains they pretend not to feel. And for many, that reflection is unbearable. They don't attack you. They attack the mirror. They criticize. They mock. They distance themselves, not because you've wronged them, but because you've confronted them with a part of themselves they've long buried in shadow. Think of the one who ridicules your ambition. Behind the laughter lives an unfulfilled dream, A life unlived. What they call arrogance in you is often the courage they never found, the strength they once had but silenced, and the harder they try to deny it, the stronger the reflection haunts them. The mirror effect is relentless. It forces the human being to see themselves, whether they want to or not. That's why so many run. Running from the mirror is easier than facing the inner face staring back. Have you ever noticed how often the hate someone feels for you has nothing to do with what you've done, and everything to do with what you awaken inside them? Humans rarely hate another person. They hate the reflection that person forces them to see. Hatred, in its essence, is only pain in disguise, the pain of witnessing in someone else what we failed to become. When someone despises your confidence, your calm, your integrity, observe. Their hostility may be nothing more than the echo of an insecurity they buried long ago. And when someone mocks your freedom, your courage to think differently, perhaps it's because they still live in the invisible chains of fear and the desperate need for approval. What you must understand is simple, but profoundly uncomfortable. Hate rarely speaks about you. It speaks about the wound you reveal. Your presence becomes a mirror, showing what others hide, and when a mirror is too honest, it becomes unbearable. The mirror effect is one of the most powerful forces in the human psyche. It tears down illusions, shatters masks, and exposes everything the mind refuses to see. When you choose to live authentically, to grow spiritually, to express who you truly are, you become a dangerous mirror. Because your authenticity threatens the lies others tell themselves to survive. You remind them of what they could have been, or what they still fear becoming. That's why so many would rather break the mirror than face their own reflection. They project onto you their frustrations, their fears, their shadows. The anger they throw at you is really the cry of a soul that cannot bear to see itself. But the mirror effect doesn't just operate in others, it works within you too. Yes, you are both the victim and the creator of projections. Think about the people who irritate you most, the behaviors you judge with disproportionate intensity. Those reactions are not random, they are invitations. Invitations to look within. The laziness you despise in others might reveal your own fear of slowing down. The arrogance you condemn could simply mirror your own hunger for recognition. And the dishonesty you cannot stand may point to the times you silenced your truth to avoid losing someone or something. The mirror effect does not lie. It exposes, it confronts, it heals. When you learn to see it clearly, you stop fighting shadows and start integrating them. You stop blaming others for your discomfort and start understanding it. Because in the end, the mirror is not your enemy. It is your greatest teacher. What you reject in others is often exactly what you haven't yet learned to accept within yourself. This is the harsh truth about projection. Whatever remains unacknowledged inside us will always find a way to appear outside through the people we meet. When someone calls you selfish, it may be because they're afraid to face their own selfishness. When they label you arrogant, it might be the reflection of their hidden desire to feel superior. When they call you a failure, they're often speaking to the part of themselves that feels defeated, powerless, and small. These reactions are automatic, unconscious, but deeply destructive. They distort reality and turn mirrors into enemies. And that's why awareness is the most powerful antidote. As long as you remain unaware of the mirror effect, you'll spend your life trying to please people, chasing approval, and fearing rejection. You'll believe that how others see you defines your worth, when in truth, it only reveals the state of their own inner world. But once you awaken, once you see with clarity, everything changes. You begin to understand that the way others treat you speaks more about them than about you. Their admiration is a reflection of the potential within them that still sleeps. Their hatred is the reflection of the shadow they refuse to accept. This realization is liberating. You stop reacting and start observing. You no longer absorb other people's poison. You witness the pain behind their words. What once hurt you now becomes a lesson. The mirror effect also explains why some relationships feel magnetically powerful. When someone admires you deeply, it isn't just because of who you are. It's because you awaken something dormant inside them, a memory of what they could become. And when someone despises you, it's for the same reason. You force them to confront something they're not yet ready to face. So when you feel the weight of rejection, pause. Instead of asking, "Why do they hate me?" ask, "What in me is?" Showing them something they cannot yet face. That single question can transform the way you live. And remember, the mirror works both ways. Look into your own reactions, irritations, and judgments. Each of them may point toward a shadow within you that still waits to be embraced. If this reflection resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to see the mirror within me." That phrase is a symbol of courage, the courage to look within, without excuses or escape. If you feel that you're walking this path of self-awareness, liberation, and inner growth, subscribe to Unshakable Mind. Here, every reflection is a mirror, and every mirror is a doorway to transformation. Because when you choose to live in alignment with your truth, you don't just change, you awaken the world around you. Your courage awakens courage in others. Your kindness inspires compassion. Your growth ignites the hidden desire in others to evolve too. The mirror effect, when seen with awareness, isn't a curse. It's an invitation to transformation. Yes, your presence might be an uncomfortable mirror, but it can also become a catalyst for healing. There are those who, upon seeing themselves reflected in you, find the strength to reclaim parts of themselves long abandoned. Your light can rekindle the light in others, but not everyone chooses to grow when faced with the mirror. Some would rather turn away, deny what they see, or attack the reflection that confronts them. That's how so many relationships fall apart, not because of what was said, but because of the silent truths someone wasn't ready to face. The mirror effect shows us that human conflict rarely comes from surface-level issues. What we see, criticism, distance, hostility, is only the tip of a psychological iceberg. What truly hurts is not what others do, but what they awaken inside us. Anger, contempt, indifference, these rarely have anything to do with you, and everything to do with the discomfort your presence evokes. There's a kind of pain most people never name, the pain of seeing their own unlived potential reflected in another person. That silent pain is called envy. It hides behind subtle gestures, a pause too long, a forced smile, a sudden distance. Envy rarely screams, it whispers, it hides between the lines of silence. To live with awareness of this is to carry a different kind of strength. You stop personalizing rejection. You stop turning every criticism into a wound. You start seeing judgment, disdain, and withdrawal as signs of something deeper, a mirror pointing toward what has yet to be integrated both in you and in them. And that's where true freedom is born. The freedom to be yourself without needing approval. The freedom to grow, even when the reflection challenges you. Information, not condemnation. Understand this. Envy is not proof of your guilt. It's proof of another person's longing. It's the unconscious recognition that you have become a mirror reflecting. possibilities they haven't yet explored. When we understand this, hatred, coldness, and distance take on a new meaning. They stop being personal attacks and become reflections of a wounded ego, of a soul that hasn't yet learned to live with its own limitations. It's pride wrestling against humility, fear resisting admiration. Human connection, that invisible web that binds us, never happens only on the surface. It's always a dialogue between shadow and light, between what is seen and what is. Repressed. Behind every emotion there's projection, behind every reaction a mirror. The mirror effect is both a challenge and an invitation. A challenge because you'll inevitably become the target of what you awaken in others, and an invitation because every reaction, admiration, love, hate, or indifference, reveals something profound about the one who feels it. When you learn to see others as mirrors, you begin to recognize hidden parts of yourself. When you see yourself as a mirror, you begin to understand the invisible reasons why people treat you the way they do. Human behavior stops being a mystery. It becomes a reflection. But among all emotions, there's one that remains the most disguised, the most corrosive: silent envy. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive through words or confessions. It lives in the pauses, in the heavy air between two people who once understood each other. In that moment when the warmth disappears without explanation, it's a shift in energy, almost imperceptible but real. Something in you senses it. Something has changed, and it has, only no one dares to name it. Envy is a poison disguised as indifference, irony, or distance. The more it's repressed, the more destructive it becomes. Human pride can't admit, "Your success makes me feel small," or "Your confidence reminds me of what I lack." So envy wears a mask of disinterest, and what was once admiration slowly sours in silence. Have you noticed this? That friend who once celebrated your victories now remains quiet. The eyes that used to light up when you shared your achievements now look away. There's no fight, no apparent reason, but there's a shadow between you. That is the silence of envy, and it's more dangerous than 1,000 hostile words, because silence doesn't confront, it consumes. It slowly corrodes connection until the bond breaks. Admiration turns into criticism. Friendship becomes rivalry. Support becomes subtle sabotage. The most curious thing is that envy is almost always born from a distorted form of admiration. Deep down, the envious person admires you, but cannot bear the pain of feeling inferior. It's not your light that irritates them. It's the fact that they can't shine the same way. Understanding the silence of envy is an act of wisdom. You begin to see beyond words and gestures. You learn to recognize when love turns into comparison and when friendship is poisoned by competition. This awareness doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. So the next time you feel someone pulling away, don't rush to blame yourself. Ask yourself, did my light reveal something the other person isn't ready to accept within themselves? That question isn't judgment, it's understanding. If you feel awakened on this journey of consciousness, write in the comments, "I choose to see beyond the silence." That is your affirmation of inner clarity. Envy often disguises itself as indifference. Have you ever felt that subtle shift? Someone who once celebrated your victories with enthusiasm now stays silent. No warm applause, no words of encouragement, no genuine smiles that once brightened your presence. The silence feels heavy, loaded, almost tangible. And if you search for a specific moment of betrayal or offense, you won't find it. Because envy doesn't appear suddenly. It grows slowly, quietly, like a shadow stretching across the background. weaving itself between affection and attention. It waits patiently for a moment of comparison, for the chance to remind the envious of what they feel they lack, and then it tightens its silent grip. What makes envy so insidious is that it feeds on closeness. Strangers may admire you, but it's often those closest to you who feel the sting of comparison most intensely. A friend, a colleague, even a family member may find themselves silently consumed by envy. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your progress exposes their own stagnation, your light, your authenticity, your courage. They illuminate the corners of unrealized potential hidden within every human being. And instead of using that against you, you learn to see it for what it is. A mirror. A chance to understand, to grow, and to remain whole. Many people retreat into silence when they don't know how to face their own shadow. They tend to their inner wounds in solitude, feeding quiet resentments that slowly turn into hostility, often without even realizing it. The silence of envy reveals itself in subtle ways. Your innocent words are twisted into arrogance, your hard-earned victories are dismissed as mere luck, and the boundaries you set to protect your self-respect are labeled as selfishness. None of this reflects your reality. It reflects their perception, distorted by insecurity and fear. Envy bends the lens through which people see you. They no longer see who you truly are, but rather what they fear they could be, yet cannot bring themselves to face. And because envy is rarely admitted or confronted directly, it spreads like a quiet poison. When it isn't named, it grows. When it isn't understood, it deepens. Few people dare to say, "I envy you." Instead, it appears through small sabotages, subtle jabs, withheld support when you need it most. Their silence isn't neutral, it's heavy, with resentment, bitterness, and comparison. It's the silence that refuses to celebrate your achievements, the silence that withholds the recognition you deserve, the silence that secretly hopes for your failure, just to ease the discomfort of someone who hasn't yet allowed themselves to evolve. But envy doesn't only live in others, it also hides within you. Denying it means staying blind to your own shadow. How many times have you looked at someone, at their freedom, their courage, their success, and felt a quiet sting of inadequacy? You may not have admitted it, but you felt it. If we don't confront that part of ourselves, we end up projecting onto others what we've rejected within. The silence of envy, then, is both a warning and a mirror. It reveals not only the shadow of others, but also your own. Understanding this brings liberation. When you realize that cold gestures, silent criticism, and emotional distance have nothing to do with your worth, but everything to do with someone else's unacknowledged shadow, you stop carrying the burden of guilt. You no longer internalize hate or hostility as proof of your flaws. You recognize them for what they are: reflections of fear, insecurity, and envy that exist in the hearts of others. The silence of envy also uncovers a deep truth about human nature. People don't measure themselves only by what they've achieved, but by what those around them have achieved. Every relationship becomes in some way a silent competition, unspoken but deeply felt. The growth of another is often perceived as a threat by those who have not yet cultivated their own light. That's why you may encounter the coldness of a friend, the distance of someone close, or the subtle disdain of those who once admired you. None of it is personal. It's an echo of their inner shadows. And paradoxically, understanding this frees you. It allows you to keep walking with authenticity, without shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, without silencing your voice, without dimming your light. When you understand the mirror effect and the silence of envy, every act of hostility stops feeling like condemnation and becomes a portrait of the other person's inner state. You begin to walk consciously, discerning when to engage and when simply to observe, protecting your energy, your peace, your unshakable mind. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below saying, "I choose to see beyond the silence of envy." Leave a like to strengthen your presence in this space of self-awareness. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Unshakable Mind. Here, we explore the mirrors of the human psyche and learn how to turn pain into growth, hostility into wisdom, and envy into understanding. Because when someone close to you begins to rise, a sense of threat often awakens. It's as if every step you take toward your own greatness makes them feel smaller. The human heart often struggles to bear the contrast between what is and what could be. But here's the deeper truth. Envy is never really about you. It's about the reflection. It's about the mirror you've become. They see in you the parts of themselves they've abandoned or suppressed. Every act of courage, every moment of authenticity, every success you embody is a silent reminder of their unlived potential. Much of the hostility you encounter in life doesn't come from your flaws, but from the light you carry. People aren't just disturbed by your mistakes. They're unsettled by what you do right, by what you have the courage to be. They can forgive weakness, but your strength confronts their insecurities. They can tolerate mediocrity, but your excellence reminds them of their own avoidance. People often embrace conformity because authenticity exposes what they try hardest to hide. The carefully built masks, the polished facades that conceal fear and pain. So instead of admitting their envy, they go silent. And in that silence, resentment grows. It's an invisible kind of resentment, quiet, subtle, yet incredibly powerful. You may believe you're surrounded by genuine support and friendship, only to realize, over time, that some were merely watching from the shadows, waiting for you to fall. That disguised silence, heavy with envy, corrodes trust. It eats away at connection. It turns admiration into animosity and friendship into quiet competition. It's an unseen force that few truly understand, yet it shapes human relationships in ways deeper than most can imagine. But understanding the nature of envy is profoundly freeing. When you recognize that the silence, coldness, and hidden hostility around you often have nothing to do with you, something inside you shifts. You stop bending to please others. You stop begging for recognition. You stop doubting your own worth. You begin to see that what stands before you is not a reflection of your failure, but of someone else's shadow. The silence of envy becomes just that, a shadow, a projection. It says nothing about your value, and everything about the unexpressed, the unlived, the fearful, and the limited parts of another person. And from that realization, a new kind of strength is born, the strength of fearless authenticity. When you walk toward your light, knowing it might disturb some, provoke reflection, or awaken shadows in others, you no longer retreat. You remain whole, steady, unshakable, guided by your inner compass. Your authenticity isn't arrogance, it's alignment. Every act of courage, every clear decision, every boundary you uphold is an act of emotional sovereignty. It's a silent reminder that no one can diminish your essence without your permission. And here lies the deepest paradox. The same reflection that stirs hostility also awakens admiration. Those who feel unsettled by your light often feel drawn to it too. They see in you what they could be, what they could dare, what they could claim, if only they had the courage. Authentic light is, therefore, both a challenge and an invitation. It disarms, inspires, and transforms, but only when the other person is ready to look within. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to act. Comment below, "I choose to walk in my light, unafraid of others' shadows." Leave a like to strengthen this message of authenticity and courage. And if you haven't already, join Unshakable Mind, where every week we explore the mirrors of the human psyche, uncover the truths behind relationships, and learn how to transform hostility, envy, and pain into power and self-awareness. Remember this: being yourself, fully, consciously, unapologetically, is the greatest silent revolution you can ever lead. Your light doesn't need permission to shine, nor should it dim itself before someone else's shadow. Walk with courage, inspire transformation, and know that authenticity, even when met with envy or hate, will always be your greatest strength. Because in the end, true victory isn't about conquering others, it's about mastering yourself, and that is where the unshakable mind begins.